I feel like reading Ramona. See, I'm at the place where I use the restroom. It's a public area, public land. Um, it's private land, owned, but open to the public between certain hours. And yeah, we'll see how long I read this before I get interrupted. But we'll see. I'm a little stoned and paranoid right now, but I'm on chapter 22. I feel better, don't feel alone. During the first day of Ramona's and Alessandro's sad journey, they scarcely spoke. Alessandro walked at the horses' heads, his face sunk on his breast, his eyes fixed on the ground. Ramona watched him in anxious fear. Even the baby's voice and cooing laugh won from him no response. After they were camped for the night, she said, "Dear Alessandro, will you not tell me where we are going?" In spite of her gentleness, there was a shade of wounded feeling in her tone. Alessandro flung himself on his knees before her and cried, Mama Hela, it seems to me I'm going mad. I cannot tell what to do. I do not know what I think. All my thoughts seem whirling round as leaves do in brooks in the time of the spring rains. Do you think I can be going mad? It was enough to make me. Ramona, her own heart wrung with fear, soothed him as best she could. Dear Alessandro, she said, let us go to Los Angeles and not live with the Indians anymore. You could get work there. You could play at dance. You could play at dances sometimes. There must be plenty of work. I could get more sewing to do, too. It would be better, I think. Man, that's honestly, she's seen something. She's actually seen the future. He looked horror-stricken at the thought. Go live among the white people, he cried. What does Mahela think would become of one Indian or two? Alone among whites, if they will come to our villages and drive us out 100 at a time, what would they do to one man alone? Oh, Mahela is foolish. But there are many of your people at work for whites at San Bernardino and other places, she persisted. Why cannot we do as they do? Yes, he said bitterly, I work for whites, so they are, Mahela has not seen. No man will pay an Indian by half wages, even long ago when the fathers were not all gone and try to help the Indians. My father has told me that it was the way only to pay an Indian one half that a white man or a Mexican had. It was the Mexicans too did that, Mahela, and now they pay the Indians in money sometimes. Half wages, sometimes in bad flour or things he does not want, sometimes in whiskey, and if he will not take it and ask for his money, they laugh and tell him to go then. One man in San Bernardino last year, when an Indian would not take a bottle of sour wine for pay for a day's work, shot him in the cheek with his pistol and told him to mind how he was insolent anymore. Oh, Mahela, do not ask me to go to work in the towns. I should kill some man, Mahela, if I saw things like that. It's honestly kind of bad, you know. Ramona shuddered and was silent. Alessandro continued, if Mahela will not be afraid, I know a place high up on the mountains where no white man has ever been, or ever will be. I found it when I was following a bear. The beast led me up. It was his home, and I said then it was a fit hiding place for a man. There is water in a little green valley. We could live there, but it would be no more than to live. It is very small, the valley. Mahela would be afraid. He's asking her. Mahela would be afraid. So, damn. If you think for the long term, if it's like a place where you think society's not going to get to, you know, for years to come, but you could also be smart enough to analyze, well, how are these people going to feel? You know, are the ideas going to change in 50 years? Are they going to have these whites? Are they going to have more compassion for the Indians, like in 50 years? You know, those things change as well. It's not just, okay, 50 years. Like, yeah, the world changes, but even the way people view certain things. So, honestly, if he's saying I'll be able to make us survive out there, we could live out there, I'd rather go out there, continue to live how they live and start their own little family, and he could be the head, you know, he's going to be the father, he's going to be the señor, you know, like the Ortegna family where they were working for and where Ramona was raised up in, Señora Ortegna. But I don't know, isn't it Señora Moreno or something like that? I can't remember, but the Señora, you know, like you could start your own thing over there. But it's hard to even see that far in the future when you're just thinking, I'd rather be away from, let's just do our own thing but then you're still afraid. Oh, they're still playing Pac-Man. You know, they're still going to these lands and still going to eat it up in a sense. And yeah, I mean, it's a hard decision. But if like she's being smart, that's the only two ways to continue to go try to find your own land. What I'm saying is like a town could be created long enough. You know, it's all about, I don't know, the timing. You know, like people living now are more fortunate than in the past. It was harder back then. It was still hard for a lot of people, but there is a lot more opportunity for a lot of people, you know? A lot more families are raising children under easier conditions. And then it starts to become hard mentally for sensitive minds, you know? But so it's kind of a tough decision. So yes, Alessandra, I would be afraid, all alone on a high mountain. But do not let us go there. Try something else first, Alessandra. Is there no other Indian village you know? There is Saboba, he said, a foot of the San Jacinto mountain, or at foot of the San Jacinto, at the foothill of San Jacinto mountain. I had thought of that. Some of my people went there from Temecula, but it is a poor little village, Mahela. Mahela would not like to live in it. Neither do I believe it will long be any safer than San Pascual. There was a kind, good old man who owned all that valley, Senor Ravallo. He found the village of Saboba there when he came to the country. What's crazy is those American people, they like pretty much just, because like, you know, like the Drake says, right, it's all about location. And it's kind of is true. Like they pretty much took over the location. Oh, if these Indians that are a lot less intelligent than us have found this really interesting spot and made it their own, like we're just gonna come make it, we're gonna advance it and make it more developed, because the location is there. That's the reason why those people magneted to that specific spot. There was water nearby. It was flat enough land to, you know, maybe grow some stuff and things of that nature. And maybe even a little higher up, you know, because so you could see, you know, things coming from a lot further away. It is one of the very oldest of all. He was good to all Indians, and he said they should never be disturbed. Never. He is dead, but his 3 sons have the estate yet. Senor Ravallo. He was a very kind, good old man who owned all that valley. It is one of the very oldest of all. He was good to all Indians, and he said they will never be disturbed. Never. He is dead, but his 3 sons have the estate yet, and I think they would keep their father's promise to the Indians. But you see, tomorrow, Mahela, they may die or go back to Mexico, as Senor Valdez did. And then the Americans will get it, as they did Temecula. And there are already white men living in the valley. We will go that way, Mahela. Mahela shall see. If she says stay, we will stay. It was in the early afternoon that they entered the broad valley of San Jacinto. They entered it from the west. As they came in, though, the sky over their heads was overcast and gray. The eastern and northeastern part of the valley was flooded with a strange light, at once ruddy and golden. It was a glorious sight. The jagged top and the spurs of San Jacinto mountain shone like the turrets and posterns of a citadel built of rubies. The glow seemed preternatural. Behold San Jacinto, cried Alessandra. Ramona exclaimed in delight. It is an omen, she said. We are going into the sunlight, out of the shadow. And she glanced back at the west, which was of a slaty blackness. S-L-A-T-Y, blackness. I like it not, said Alessandro. The shadow follows too fast. Indeed it did. Even as he spoke, a fierce wind blew from the north, and tearing off fleeces from the black clouds sent them in scurrying masses across the sky. In a moment more, snowflakes began to fall. Holy Virgin, cried Alessandro. Too well he knew what it meant. He urged the horses, running fast beside them. It was of no use. Too much even for Baba and Benito to make any haste with a heavily loaded wagon. There was an old sheep corral and a hut not over a mile farther. It will, if we could but reach it, groaned Alessandro. Mahela, you and the child will freeze. I forgot they had a baby. She is warm on my breast, said Ramona, but Alessandro, what ice in this wind? It is like a knife at my back. What ice in this wind? It is like a knife at my back. See, already somebody parking behind me. I already told you that someone was gonna come bug me. Didn't I tell you? Alessandro uttered another ejaculation of dismay. The snow was fast thickening already. The track was covered. The wind lessened. Thank God that wind no longer cuts as it did, said Ramona, her teeth chattering, clasping the baby closer and closer. I would rather it blew than not, said Alessandro. It will carry the snow before it. A little more of this and we cannot see any more than in the night. Oh, he said, I'd rather it blue. Still thicker and faster fell the snow. The air was dense. It was, as Alessandro had said, worse than the darkness of night. The strange opaque whiteness, thick, choking, freezing one's breath. Presently the rough jolting of the wagon showed that they were off the road. The horses stopped, refused to go on. We are lost if we stay here, cried Alessandro. Come on, my Benito, come. Okay, come on, my Benito, come. And he took him by the head and pulled him by main force back into the road and led him along. It was terrible. Ramona's heart sank within her. She felt her arms growing numb. How much longer could she hold the baby safe? She called to Alessandro. He did not hear her. The wind had risen again. The snow was being blown in masses. It was like making headway among whirling snowdrifts. Okay, so we will die, thought Ramona. Perhaps it is as well. And that was the last she knew till she heard a shouting and found herself being shaken and beaten, and heard a strange voice saying, sorry to handle you're so rough, man, but we've got to get you out the fire. Out the fire. Fire? Were there such things as fire and warmth? Mechanically, she put the baby into the unknown arms that were reaching up to her and cried to rise from her seat, but she could not move. Sit still, said the strange voice. I'll just carry the baby to my wife and come back for you. I'll allow you couldn't get up on your feet, and the tall form disappeared. The baby thus vigorously disturbed from her warm sleep, began to cry. Dude, this book is amazing. Thank God, said Alessandro. At the plunging horses' heads, the child is alive, my Hela, he called. Yes, Alessandro, she answered faintly, the gusts sweeping her voice like a distant echo past him. It was a marvelous rescue. They had been nearer the old sheep corral than Alessandro had thought, but except the other storm-beaten travelers had reached it before them, Alessandro had never found it. So this is what he's thinking. Just as he felt his strength failing him and had thought to himself in almost the same despairing words as Ramona, this will end all our troubles, he saw a faint light to the left. Instantly he had turned the horses' heads towards it. The ground was rough and broken, and more than once he had been in danger of overturning the wagon, but he had pressed on, shouting at intervals for help. At last his call was answered, and another light appeared, this time a swinging one, coming slowly towards him, a lantern in the hand of a man whose first words, Wall, stranger, Allah, you're into trouble. He's saying, I think you're into trouble. He's Italian and being funny. Well, stranger, why the hell you out here in the snow? Were as intelligible to Alessandro as if they had been spoken in the purest San Luiseno dialect, speaking English. Not so to the stranger, Alessandro's grateful reply in Spanish. Another of these no-count Mexicans, by thunder, thought Jeff Hired to himself. Blamed if I'd lived in a country all my life, if I wouldn't know better to get caught out in such weather as this. And as he put the crying babe into his wife's arms, he said half impatiently, if I'd known it was Mexicans real, I would have gone out to 'em. They're more to hum than I am in these here tropics. I believe he's a black American. Why, you're a pretty blue-eyed little thing, she exclaimed as she looked into the baby's face. I declare, Jose, think of such mites this being out in this weather. I'll just warm up some milk for it this minute. Better see to the mother first, said Jeff, leading half, carrying Ramona into the hut. She's nigh about froze stiff. So what did he say now, Jeff? You know you wouldn't let anything in shape of a human creature go perishing past our fire such weather this, replied the woman as she took the baby crying. Now she took the baby, which recognized the motherly hand as its first touch, and ceased crying. I skipped the whole paragraph right there. Okay, so another of these no-count Mexicans by thunder, thought Jeff Hired to himself. Blamed if I lived in the country all my life, if I wouldn't know better than to get caught out in such weather as this. Also, he's saying, like, dude, yeah, he's pretty much saying, Mexican dude, how do you get caught up in weather like this and you're from here, pretty much? And as he put the crying babe into his wife's arms, he said half impatiently, if I know 'twas was Mexicans, I wouldn't have gone out there. They're more to hum than I am And these year tropics. And these year, maybe, I think he's saying like, nah, Jeff, you know you wouldn't let anything in shape of a human creature go perishing past the fire such weather as this. You say, no, you wouldn't. He still would have went out there, replied the woman as she took the baby, which recognized the motherly hand as it first touched and ceased crying. Why, you're a pretty blue-eyed little thing, she exclaimed as she looked into the baby's face. I declare, Jose, think of such a mite as this being out in this weather. I would just warm up some milk for it this minute. Better see to the mother first, Ree, and Jeff leading the half-carrying Ramona into the hut. She nigh about froze stiff. But the sight of her baby safe and smiling was a better restorative for Ramona than anything else, and in a few moments she had fully recovered. It was in a strange group she found herself. On a mattress in the corner of the hut lay a young man apparently about 25, whose bright eyes and flushed cheeks told but too plainly the story of his disease. The woman, tall, ungainly, her face gaunt, her hands hardened and wrinkled, gown ragged, shoes ragged, her dry and broken light hair wound in a careless, straggling knot in her neck, wisps of it flying over her forehead, was certainly not a prepossessing figure, yet in spite of her careless, unkempt condition, there was a certain gentle dignity in her bearing and a kindliness in her glance which won trust and warmed hearts at once. Her pale blue eyes were still keen-sighted as she fixed them on Ramona. She thought to herself, this ain't no common Mexican nohow. By ye movers, she said. 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 Ramona stared. In the little English she knew, that word was not included. Ah, senora, she said regretfully, I cannot talk in the English speech, only in Spanish. Spanish, eh? You mean Mexican? Joe's higher, he can talk that. He can't talk much, though. Tain't good for him. His lungs is outer kilter. That's what we're bringing him higher for warm climate. Pears like it, don't it? And she chuckled grimly, but with a side glance of ineffable tenderness as... I see another person coming. And this time right here. Like right here, bro. Like who wants to park next to somebody, dog? I have no idea who. I have no idea who. I have no idea who. It's like right next to me. She just turned my phone. Let's see where she goes. Alright, hold on. I'm not gonna read in front of somebody. Especially right in front. So what you mean by be ye movers, she said. Be ye movers. Okay, this ain't no common Mexican know-how. Be ye movers, she said. Ramona stared into the little English she knew. That word was not included. Okay, so Spanish, eh? You mean Mexican, Joe's. Higher, he can talk that. Joe's higher, like his helper. Joe's higher, he can talk that. He can't talk much, though. It ain't good for him. His lungs is out or kilter. Like out of place, probably. That's what we're bringing him here for. That's why we're bringing him higher for warm climate. Pears like it, don't it? And she chuckled grimly, but with a side glance of ineffable tenderness at the sick man. Ask her who they be, Joe, she added. Joe lifted himself on his elbow and fixing his shining eyes on Ramona said in Spanish, my mother asks if you are travelers. Yes, said Ramona, we have come all the way from San Diego. We are Indians. Oh, so Joe's a son. Indians? Ejaculated Joe's mother. Lord save us, Joe's. Have we really taken Indians? What on earth? Well, she's fond of her babies, any white woman. Or she's fond of her babies, any white, like just as much as an American would be. I can see that, an Indian or no Indian, they've got to stay now. You couldn't turn a dog out in such weather as this. I bet them baby's father was white then. Look at them blue eyes. Ramona listened and looked intently, but could understand nothing. Almost she doubted if the woman were really speaking English. She had never before heard so many English sentences without being able to understand one word. The Tennessee drawl so altered even the commonest words that she did not recognize them. Turning to Joe's, she said gently, I know very little English. I'm so sorry I cannot understand. Will it tire you to interpret to me what your mother said? The author makes it seem as if she knew. Joe's was as full of humor as his mother. She wants me to tell her what you was saying, he said. I allow. I'll only tell her the part on she'll like best. My mother says he can stay here with us till the storm is over, he said to Ramona. Swifter than lightning, Ramona had seized the woman's hand and carried it to her heart with an expressive gesture of gratitude and emotion. Thanks, senora, she cried. What is it she calls me, Joes? Asked his mother. Senora, he replied. It only means the same as lady. Shaw, Joes. You tell her I ain't any lady. Tell her everybody around here we live calls me Auntie Reed or Miss Hyer. She can call me whichever she's a mind to. She's real sweet-spoken. Can't read comfortable. I'll keep reading. All right. With some difficulty, Joes explained his mother's disclaimer of the title, Senora, and the choice of names she offered to Ramona. Ramona, with smiles which won both mother and son, repeated after him both names, getting neither exactly right at first trial, and finally said, I like Aunt Ree best. She is so kind, like aunt to everyone. Nah, ain't that queer, Joe, said Aunt Ree. Out here in this wilderness to catch somebody saying that, just what they all say to him. I don't know, I'm any kinder than anybody else. I don't want to see anybody put upon, nor no way suffering. If so be's I can help, but that ain't anything strawnery, as I know. I don't know how anybody could feel any different. There's lots do's, mammy, replied Joes affectionately. You'd find out fast enough if you went round here, or if you went round more. There's mighty few goods you air to everybody. There's mighty few goods you air to everybody. There's lots to do, mammy, replied Joe affectionately. You'd find out fast enough if you went around more. There's mighty few goods you air to everybody. Ramona was crouching in the corner by the fire, her baby held close to her breast. The place which at first had seemed a haven of warmth, she now saw was indeed but a poor shelter against the fearful storm which raged outside. It was only a hut of rough boards, carelessly knocked together for a shepherd's temporary home. It had been long unused, and many of the boards were loose and broken. Through these crevices, at every blast of the wind, the fine snow swirled on the hearth. On the hearth were burning a few sticks of wood, dead cottonwood branches which Jeff Hyer had hastily collected. Before the storm reached its height, a few more sticks lay by the hearth. Aunt Ree glanced at them anxiously, a poor provision for a night in the snow. Be ye warm, Joe, she asked. Are you warm? Not very, mammy, he said, but I ain't cold neither, and that's something. It was the way in the Hyer family to make the best of things. They had always possessed this virtue to such an extent that they suffered from it as from a vice. There was hardly to be found in all southern Tennessee a more contented, shiftless, ill-bestead family than theirs. But there was no grumbling. Whatever went wrong, whatever was lacking, it was just like our luck, they said, and did nothing or next to nothing about it. Good-natured, affectionate, humorous people, after all. They got more comfort out of life than many a family whose surface conditions were comparably better than theirs. When Joe's, their oldest child and only son, broke down, had hemorrhage after hemorrhage, and the doctor said the only thing that could save him was to go across the plains in a wagon to California, they said. What good luck Lizzie was married last year. What good luck Lizzie was married last year. Now there ain't nothing to hinder selling the farm and go right off. And they sold their little place for half it was worth, traded cattle for a pair of horses, and covered a excuse me. Okay, well, good luck. Lizzie was married last year. Now there ain't nothing to hinder selling the farm and go right off. So the kid was older. Make the best of things, good-natured, affectionate, humorous people. When Joe's, their oldest child and only son, broke down. So luck, Lizzie was married last year. Now there ain't nothing to hinder selling the farm and go right off. And they sold their little place for half it was worth, traded cattle for a pair of horses and a covered wagon, and set off, half beggared, with their sick boy on a bed in the bottom of the wagon. As cheery as if they were rich people on a pleasure trip, a pair of steers to spell the horses, and a cow to give milk for Joe's. They drove before them, and so they had come by slow stages, sometimes camping for a week at a time, all the way from Tennessee to San Jacinto Valley. They were rewarded. Joe's was getting well. Another 6 months, they thought, would see him cured, and it would have gone hard with anyone who had tried to persuade either Jefferson or Maria Hire that they were not as lucky a couple as could be found had they not saved Joshua, their son. Nicknames among this class of poor whites in South seem singularly like those in vogue in New England. From totally opposite motives, the lazy, easygoing Tennessean and the hurry-driven Vermonter cut down all their family names to the shortest. To speak 3 syllables where one will answer seems to the Vermonter a waste of time, to the Tennessean quite too much trouble. Mrs. Hire could hardly recollect ever having heard her name. Maria, in full as a child, and until she was married, she was simply Ree. And as soon as she had a house of her own to become a center of hospitality and help, she was adopted by common consent of the neighborhood, and a sort of titular and universal aunthood, which really was a much greater tribute and honor than she dreamed. Not a man, woman, or child within her reach that did not call her or know of her as Aunt Ree. They did not call her or know her as Aunt Ree. I don't know whether I'd best be any more fire now or not, she said reflectively. If this storm's going to last till morning, we'll come short of wood, that's clear. As she spoke, the door of the hut burst open and her husband staggered in, followed by Alessandro, both covered with snow, their arms full of wood. Alessandro luckily knew of a little clump of young cottonwood trees in a ravine only a few rods from the house, and the first thing he had thought of after tethering the horses and shelter between the hut and the wagons was to get wood. I wonder if he recognizes the land, right? Seeing him take a thatcher from the wagon, had understood, got his own, and followed, and now they lay on the ground enough to keep them warm for hours. As soon as Alessandro had thrown down his load, he darted to Ramona and, kneeling down, looked anxiously into the baby's face, then into hers, and he said devoutly, "The saints be praised, Mama Hella, it is a miracle." Jose listened in dismay to this ejaculation. If they ain't Catholics, he thought, what kind of Injuns be they, I wonder? I won't tell Mammy they're Catholic. She feel was worse than ever. I don't care what they be. The gal's got the sweetest eyes in her head ever I saw since I was born. Me, I'll be like, oh, they're spiritual people. You can trust them, you know. By help of Jose's interpreting, the two families soon became well acquainted with each other's condition and plans, and a feeling of friendliness, surprising under the circumstances, grew up between them. Jeff said Aunt Ree. Jeff said Aunt Ree. Okay, so Jeff is the dad then. So Jeff, they can't understand a word we say. So 'tis said no harm done, I suppose, to speak for 'em. I thought 't don't seem hardly fair to take advantage of their not knowing any language but their own, but I just tell you that I've got a lesson in the subject of Injuns. I've always had a real mean feeling about 'em. I didn't want to come nigh 'em, nor to have 'em come nigh me or near 'em. This woman here, she's as sweet a creature ever I see, and as bound up in that baby's ear could ask any woman to be. And as for the man, can't you see, Jeff, he just worships the ground she walks on. That's a fact, Jeff. I don't know as ever I see a white man think so much of a woman. Come now, Jeff, do you think you ever did yourself? Aunt Ree was excited. The experience was to her almost incredible. Her ideas of Indians had been drawn from newspapers and from a book or two of narratives of massacres, and from an occasional sight of vagabond bands or families they had encountered in their journey across the plains. Here she found herself sitting side by side in friendly intercourse with an Indian man and an Indian woman whose appearance and behavior were attractive, towards whom she found herself singularly drawn. "I'm free to confess, Joe," she said. "I wouldn't have believed it. I ain't seen nobody, black, white, or gray, since we left home. I've took to like these year folks, and they're real darks, any N-word in Tennessee." So the black lady saying, they're real darks any N-word in Tennessee, and he's pure Injun. Her father was white, she says, but she don't call herself nothing but an Injun. The same's he is, D. You notice the way she looks at him, Jose? Don't she just set a store by that feller? And I don't blame her. Indeed, Jose had noticed no man was likely to see Ramona with Alessandro without perceiving the rare quality of her devotion to him. And now there was added to this devotion an element of indefinable anxiety which made his vigilance unceasing. Ramona feared for Alessandro's reason. She had hardly put it into words to herself, but the terrible fear dwelt with her. She felt that another blow would be more than he could bear. The storm lasted only a few hours. When it cleared, the valley was a solid expanse of white, and the stars shone out as if in an Arctic sky. It will be all good. It will be all gone by noon tomorrow, said Alessandro to Jose, who was dreading the next day. Not really, he said. You will see, said Alessandro. I have often known it thus. It is like death while it lasts, but it is never long. The Hyers were on their way to some hot springs on the north side of the valley. Here they proposed to camp for 3 months to try the waters for Jose. They had a tent and all that was necessary for living in the primitive fashion. Henri was looking forward to the rest with greater anticipation. She was heartily tired of being on the move. Her husband's anticipations were of more stirring nature. He had heard that there was good hunting on San Jacinto Mountain. When he found that Alessandro knew the region thoroughly and had been thinking of settling there, he rejoiced and proposed to him to become his companion and guide in hunting expeditions. Ramona grasped eagerly at the suggestion. Companionship, she was sure, would do Alessandro good. Companionship, the outdoor life, and the excitement of hunting of which he was fond. This hot spring cañon was only a short distance from the Saboba village of which they had spoken as a possible home, which she had from the first desired to try. She no longer had punions to the thought of an Indian village. She already felt a sense of kinship and shelter with an Indian people. She had become, as Carmena had said, one of them. Punions, P-U-G-N-A-N-C-E. A few days saw the two families settled, the Hyers in their tent in a wagon. The Hyers in a tent and wagon at the hot springs, and Alessandro and Ramona with the baby in a little adobe house in the Saboba village. The house belonged to an old Indian woman who, her husband having died, had gone to live with a daughter and was very glad to get a few dollars by renting her own house. It was a wretched place, one small room walled with poorly made adobe bricks, thatched with tule, T-U-L-E, no floor and only one window. When Alessandro heard Ramona say cheerily, "Oh, this will do very well when it is repaired a little," his face was convulsed, and he turned away, but he said nothing. Come on, sensitive. It was the only house to be had in the village, and there were few better. 2 months later, no one knew. 2 months later, no one would have known it. Alessandro had had good luck in hunting. 2 fine deerskins covered the earth floor. A third was spread over the bedstead, and horns hung on the walls served for hooks to hang clothes upon. The scarlet calico canopy was again set up over the bed, and the woven cradle on its red manzanita frame stood near. A small window in the door and one more cut in the walls let in light and air. On a shelf near one of these windows stood the little Madonna, again wreathed with vines as in San Pasquale. When Henri first saw the room after it was thus arranged, she put both arms akimbo and stood in the doorway, her mouth wide open, her eyes full of wonder. Akimbo, A-K-I-M-B-O. Always learn something new. Finally, her wonder framed itself in ejaculation. "Wall, I allow your air fixed up." Well, I allow your air fixed up. Like all fixed up, are fixed up. Well, I allow you're all fixed up. I guess that's how the writer is trying to get that message across. So when Henri first saw the room, so Henri, she came in the room. Henri, at her best estate, had never possessed a room which had the expression of this poor little mud hut of Ramona's. She could not understand it. The more she studied the place, the less she understood it. On returning to the tent, she said to Jose, "It beats all ever I see, the way that Indian woman's got fixed up out or nothing. It ain't no more than a hovel, a mud hovel, Jose. Not such a bigger in this year tent for all 3 of them, and the bed and the stove and everything. And I vow, Joe, she fixes so to look just like a parlor. It beats me, it does. I just like you to see it." So how much we got left, man? This is a long chapter, my friend. And when Joe saw it and Jeff, they were as full of wonder as Aunt Ree had been. Dimly they recognized the existence of a principle here which had never entered into their life. They did not know it by name, and it could not have been either taught, transferred, or explained to the good-hearted wife and mother who had been so many years the affectionate, disorderly genius of their home. But they felt its charm, and when one day after the return of Alessandro and Jeff from a particularly successful hunt, the two families had sat down together, to a supper of Ramona's cooking, stewed venison and artichokes, and frijoles with chili. Their wonder was still greater. Ask her if this is Indian style of cooking, Joes, said Aunt Ree. I never thought nothing of beans, but these are good and no mistake. Ramona laughed. No, it is Mexican, she said. I learned to cook from an old Mexican woman. Well, I like the recipe on it. She said the receipt on it. Well, I like the receipt on it, but I allow I should never get the time to fuss with it, said Henri. But I may as well get the roll now. I'm here. Alessandro began to lose some of his gloom. He had earned money. He had been lifted out of himself by kindly companionship. He saw Ramona cheerful, the little one sunny, the sense of home, the strongest passion Alessandro possessed. Next to his love for Ramona began again to awaken him. He began to talk about building a house. I gotta drink some water. All right. He found things in the village better than he feared. It was but a poverty-stricken little handful, to be sure. Still, they were unmolested. The valley was large. Their stock ran free. The few white settlers, one at the upper end and 2 or 3 on the south side, had manifested no disposition to crowd the Indians. The Ravallo brothers were living on the estate still, and there was protection in that. Alessandro thought. Mahala was content. Mahala found friends. Something not quite hope, but akin to it, began to stir in Alessandro's heart. He would build a house. Mahala should no longer live in this mud hut, but to his surprise, when he spoke of it, Ramona said no. They had all they needed now. Was not Alessandro comfortable? She was. It would be wise to wait longer before building. Ramona, see, this is a good book even on business. Ramona knew many things that Alessandro did not. While he had been away on his hunts, she had had speech with many a one he never saw. She had gone to the store and post office several times to exchange baskets or lace for flour. And she had heard talk there which disquieted her. She did not believe that Sabobo was safe. One day she had heard a man say, "If there is a drought, we shall have the devil to pay with our stock before winter is over." "Yes," said another, "and look at those damn Indians over there in Sabobo, with the water running all the time in their village. It is a shame they should have that spring." Damn. So it's damn, it's crazy. It says it in the Bible that a woman in Proverbs, I think 30 or 31, it says that it says something about your wife being keen to the community. Not for worlds would Ramona have told this to Alessandro. She kept it locked in her own breast, but it rankled there like a ceaseless warning and prophecy. When she reached home that day, she went down to the spring in the center of the village and stood a long time looking at the bubbling water. It was indeed a priceless treasure. A long irrigating ditch led from it down into the bottom, where lay the cultivated fields, many acres in wheat, barley, and vegetables. Alessandro himself had fields there from which they would harvest all they needed for the horses and their cow all winter, in case pasturage failed. If the whites took away this water, Sabobo would be ruined. However, as the spring began in the very heart of the village, they could not take it without destroying the village. And the Ravallos would surely never let that be done, thought Ramona. While they live, it will not happen. It was a sad day for Ramona and Alessandro when the kindly hires pulled up their tent stakes and left the valley. Their intended 3 months had stretched into 6. They had so enjoyed the climate, and the waters had seemed to do such good to Joe's. But we ain't rich folks, you know. Not by a long ways, we ain't, said Aunt Ree, and we've got pretty nigh down to where Jeff and me's got to begin earning something. Or got to begin earning something. If we can get settled in some of these towns where these carpentering to be done, Jeff, he's a master hand to that kind of work. Though your mind think it, and I can earn right smart at weaving. Just give me a good carpet loom, and I won't be beholden to nobody for victuals. I just do love weaving. I don't know how I've contented myself this whole year, or nigh about a year, without a loom. Jeff, he says to me once, says he, "Reed, do you think you'd be contented in heaven without your loom?" And I was free to say I didn't know as I should. What's a loom? I don't know. L-O-O-M. Is it hard? Cried Ramona. Can I learn to do it? It was wonderful what progress in understanding and speaking English Ramona had made in these 6 months. I can imagine her accent. It's amazing. She now understood nearly all that was said directly to her, though she could not follow general and confused conversation. Well, it is and it ain't, said Aunt Ree. I don't suppose I'm much of a judge, for I can't remember when I first learned it. I know I sat in the loom to weave when my feet couldn't reach the floor, and I don't remember nothing about first learning to spool and warp. I've tried to teach lots of folks, and some learns quick and some don't never learn. It's just It just to strike some, like surprise him. I should think, nah, that you was one of the kind could turn your hand to anything. When we get settled in San Bernardino, if you'll come down there, I'll teach you all I know and be glad to. I don't know as to going to be much of a place for carpet weaving though. Anywhere's round in this your country, not but what there's plenty of rags, but folks seem to be wearing them. Pretty general wear, I should say. I've seen more clothes on folks' backs higher that won't no more and fit for carpet rags than any place ever I struck. They are a dreadful chefless lot, these your Mexicans, and the Injuns is worse. Now when I say Injuns, I don't ever mean y'all. You know that. You ain't ever seemed to me one might like an Injun. Most of our people haven't had any chance, said Ramona. You wouldn't believe it if I were to tell you what things have been done to them, how they are robbed and cheated and turned out of their homes. And she told the story of Temecula and of San Pascual in Spanish to Jules, who translated it with no loss in the telling. Aunt Ree was aghast. She found no words to express her indignation. I don't believe the government knows anything about it, she said. Why, they take folks up and penitentiarize them for life back in Tennessee for things that ain't so bad yet. Bad's that. Somebody ought to be sent to tell them to Washington what's going on higher. I think it's the people in Washington that have done it, said Ramona sadly. It is not in Washington all the laws are made, she asked. Is it not in Washington that all the laws are made? I believe so, said Henri. Ain't it, Jose? It's Congress, ain't it? Makes the laws. I believe so, said Jose. They make some at any rate. I don't know if they make them all. It is all done by American law, said Ramona. All these things nobody can help himself. For if anybody goes against the law, he has to be killed or put in prison. That was what the sheriff told Alessandro at Temecula. He felt very sorry for the Temecula people, the sheriff did. But he had to obey the law himself. Alessandro says there isn't any help. Aunt Ree shook her head. She was not convinced. I shall make a business of finding out about this thing yet, she said. I think you ain't got the rights onto yet. There's cheating somewhere. It's all cheating, said Ramona, but there isn't any help for it, Aunt Ree. The Americans think it is no shame to cheat for money. The Americans think it is no shame to cheat for money. I'm an American, cried Aunt Ree, and Jeff Heyer and Jose, we're Americans, and we wouldn't cheat nobody. Not if we knowed it, not a dollar. We're poor, and all of us expect to be, but we're above cheating, and I tell you now, the American people don't want any of this cheating done now. I'm going to ask Jeff how it is. Why, it's a burning shame to any country, so it is. I think something ought to be done about it. I wouldn't mind going myself if there went anybody else. This is a fictional book because black people were slaves, homie. They had it fucking really bad, so she's very, like the writer wrote earlier, something about them being accepting to their condition is a vice, you know what I mean? Exactly right there. A seed had been sown in Aunt Ree's mind which was not destined to die for want of soil. She was hot with shame and anger and full of impulse to do something. I ain't nobody, she said. I know that well enough. I ain't nobody nor nothing, but I allow I got something to say about the country I live in and the way things had ought to be, or at least Jeff has, and that's the same thing. I tell you, Jose, I ain't going to rest, nor to give you and your father to rest, another till you find out about what all this here means she's been telling us. But sharper and closer anxieties than any connected with the rights to lands and homes were pressing upon Alessandro and Ramona. All summer the baby had been slowly drooping, so slowly that it was each day possible for Ramona to deceive herself, thinking that there had been since yesterday no loss, perhaps a little gain, but looking back from the autumn to the spring and now from the winter to the autumn, there was no doubt that she had been steadily going down. From the day of that terrible chill and the snowstorm, she had never been quite well, Ramona thought. Before that she was strong, always beautiful and merry. Now her pinched little face was sad to see. And sometimes for hours she made a feeble wailing cry without any apparent cause. All the simple remedies that Henri had known had failed to touch her disease. In fact, Henri, from the first, had been baffled in her own mind by the child's symptoms. Day after day, Alessandro, knelt by the cradle, his hands clasped, his face set, hour after hour, night and day, indoors and out. He bore her in his arms, trying to give her relief, prayer after prayer to the Virgin, to the saints, Ramona had said, and candles by the dozen. Though money was now scant, she had burned before the Madonna, all in vain. At last, she implored Alessandro to go to San Bernardino and see a doctor. Find Henri, she said. She will go with you with Joe's and talk to him. She can make him understand. Tell Henri she seems just as she did when they were here, only weaker and thinner. Alessandro found Henri in a sort of shanty on the outskirts of San Bernardino. Now two rights, yes, she said, as if she ever would be. She found work, or Jeff found work, and Joe's too had been able to do a little on pleasant days. He had made a loom and put up a loom house for his mother, a floor just large enough to hold a loom, rough walls and a roof, one small square window, that was all. But if Henri had been presented with the palace, she would not have been so well pleased. Already she had woven a rag carpet for herself, was at work on one for a neighbor, and had promised as many more as she could to do for the before spring. The news of the arrival of a rag carpet weaver having gone with the dispatch all through the lower walks of San Bernardino life. I wouldn't have believed they had so many rags besides what they were wearing, said Henri, as sack after sack appeared at her door. Already, too, Henri had gathered up the threads of the village life. In a friendly, impressionable way, she had come into relation with scores of people and knew who was who and what was what and why among them all, far better than many an old resident of the town. When she saw Benito galloping up to her door, she sprang down from her high stool at the loom and ran bareheaded to the gate, and before Alessandro had dismounted, cried, "You're just the man I wanted. I've been trying to arrange it so we could go down and see her, but Jeff couldn't leave the jobs he's got, and I druv nigh about off my feet, and I don't know when we'd have fetched it. How's all? Why didn't you come in their wagon and fetch him long? I got reaps to tell you. I allow you hadn't got the rights, oh, all them things. The government ain't on the side of the thieves, as you said. I know they couldn't be. And they've just sent out a man a purpose to look after things for you, to take care of the engines and nothing else. That's what he's here for. He come last month. He's a real nice man. I seen him and talked with him a spell last week. I'm going to make his wife a rag carpet, and there's a doctor to tend to you when you're sick, and the government pays him. You don't have to pay nothing, and I tell you, that's a heap of saving to get your doctoring for nothing. Henri was out of breath. Alessandro had not understood half she said. He looked about helplessly for hose. Joe's was away. In his broken English, he tried to explain what Ramona had wished her to do. Doctor, there's just what I'm telling you. There's one here's paid by the government to tend to all the engines that's sick. I'll go in and show you to his house. I can tell him just how the baby is. Perhaps he'll drive down and see her. Ah, if he would, what would Mahela say? Should she see him enter the door bringing a doctor? Luckily, Joe's returned in time to go with him to the doctor's house as interpreter. Alessandro was bewildered. He could not understand this new phase of affairs. Could it be true? As they walked along, he listened with trembling, half-incredulous hope to Joe's interpretation of Henri's voluble narrative. The doctor was in his office. To Henri's statement of Alessandro's errand, he listened indifferently, and then he said, "Is he an agency Indian?" "A what?" exclaimed Henri. "Does he belong to the agency? Is his name on the agency books?" "No," said she. "He never heard of any agency till I was telling him just now. We knew him and her, over in San Jacinto. He lives in Saboba. He's never been to San Bernardino since the agent come about. He didn't say the B. Come out. I'm gonna say about. Well, is he going to put his name down on the book?" said the doctor impatiently. "You ought to have taken him to the agent first." "Ain't you the government doctor for all engines?" asked Henri wrathfully. "That's what I heard." "Well, my good woman, you hear a great deal. I expect that isn't true." And the doctor laughed coarsely, but not ill-naturedly. Alessandro, all the time studying his face with the scrutiny of one awaiting life and death. "I am the agency physician, and I suppose all the Indians will sooner or later come in and report themselves to the agent. You better take this man over there. What does he want now?" Henri began to explain the baby's case. Cutting her short, the doctor said, Yes, I understand. I'll give him something that will help her." Going into an inner room, he brought out a bottle of dark-colored liquid, wrote a few lines of prescription, and handed it to Alessandro, saying, "That will do her good, I guess." "Thanks, senor." "Thanks," said Alessandro. The doctor stared. "That's the first Indian said thank you in this office," he said. "You tell the agent you brought him a rara avis, a rare bird." "What's that?" Joe said, Auntie Riri, as they went out. "Dunno," said Joe's. "I don't like that man anyhow, mammy. He's no good." Alessandro looked at the bottle of medicine like one in a dream. Would it make the baby well? Had it indeed been given to him by that great government in Washington? Was he to be protected now? Could this man who had been sent out to take care of Indians get back his San Pasqual farm for him? Alessandro's brain was in a whirl. From the doctor's office, they went to the agent's house. Here, Henri found herself more at home. "I brought yet the engine I was telling you of," she said with a wave of her hand toward Alessandro. "We've been to the doctor's to get some medicine for his baby. She's real sick, I'm afraid." The agent sat down at his desk, opened a large ledger, saying as he did so, "The man's never been here before, has he?" "No," said Henri. "What's his name?" Joe's gave it, and the agent began to write it in his book. "Stop him," cried Alessandro agitatedly to Joe's. "Don't let him write till I know what he puts my name in his book for." "Wait," said Joe's. "He doesn't want you to write his name in that book. He wants to know what it's put there for." Wheeling his chair with a look of suppressed impatience, yet trying to speak kindly, the agent said, "There's no making these Indians understand anything. They seem to think if I have their names in my book, it gives me some power over them." "Well, don't it?" said the direct-minded Henri. "Ain't you got any power over them? If you ain't got it over them, who you got it over? What you going to do from?" The agent laughed in spite of himself. "Well, Henri," she was already Henri to the agent's boys. "That's just the trouble with this agency. It is very different from what it would be if I had all my Indians on a reservation." "That's just the trouble with this agency. It is very different from what it would be if I had all my Indians. See, I'm already saying Indians. This is about Indians on a reservation." Alessandro understood the words "my Indians." He had heard them before. "What does he mean by his Indians, Joes?" he asked fiercely. "I will not have my name in his book if it makes me his." When Joes reluctantly interpreted this, the agent lost his temper. "That's all the use there is trying to do anything with him. Let him go, then, if he doesn't want any help from the government." "Oh, no, no," cried Henri. "You just explain it to Joes, and he'll make him understand." Alessandro's face had darkened. All this seemed to him exceedingly suspicious. Could it be possible that Henri and Joes, the first whites except for Miss Hartzell he had ever trusted, were deceiving him? Also, they're white, but they're from Tennessee. I thought they were African American. I thought they were blacks. Not blacks, I shouldn't even say it like that. I thought they were Black Americans. That they were simple, but they themselves might be deceived. Okay. Alessandro's face had darkened. Also, remember, he's asking, did they deceive me? No, that wasn't possible, but they themselves might be deceived. That they were simple and ignorant, Alessandro well knew. "Let us go," he said. "I do not wish to sign any paper." "Now don't be a fool, will you? You ain't signing a thing," said Henri. "Just you tell him I say there ain't a binding him, having his name in that book. It's only so the agent can know what Indians wants help and where they are. Ain't that so?" she added, turning to the agent. "Tell him he can't have the agency doctor if he ain't on the agency books." "Not have the doctor give up this precious medicine which might save his baby's life? No, he cannot do that," my Helen would say. "Let the name be written rather than that." But you already gave him the medicine though, right? And then he had to come over here just to get more help, I think. "Let him write the name then," said Alessandro doggedly. Like doggedly. Like, I don't know what that means, just rough. But he went out of the room feeling as if he had put a chain around his neck. Yeah, dude, I thought this was a black family, Black American family, for the way they were talking. Honestly, I think the author of this book is a black woman, Helen Hunt Jackson. So yeah, I thought it was a black family. It's kind of threw me for a loop. But yeah, that's a crazy part. He's wondering, like, are they turning against me? But all this is, it's just the prehistory of how they kept track and how they keep track of us now. But it's all we know. We just feel as if we go to school. It's like school's a way for them to kind of know who you are and where you're at, which is a good thing. I think we should really focus on education as a real key skill for life, though. Peace, y'all.